All right guys, so we're gonna get the Ditra-Heat mat down. So they call this an uncoupling membrane that you thin set down to the floor. It has these pucks in it that we can put our heat cable, and then you tile on top of this, and it's supposed to act as isolation from your subfloor. So if your subfloor shifts or moves, that doesn't transfer through to your tile. It prevents your tile from cracking, your grout from cracking. So these are the sheets. You can get it in the sheet form where it's like a 3'3" by 2'7" or something like that, roughly, sheet. Or you can buy it in big rolls. I feel like the sheets are easier to work with when you're in small areas like this. It's not trying to curl up on you. And what I'm doing first is I like to kind of dry fit everything, get all my cuts made, and just kind of get it laid out to where it all is gonna fit. And I do all that before I go mix up any thin set. But we're just gonna keep cutting them, trying to get them to fit the best we can with the least amount of waste. It is kind of important to keep the grooves lined up, so that way as your cables get ran through here, you can just follow the same path and you don't get to a seam and then you have to try to jog the cable around. I also like to have it where the seam of these doesn't land like directly on the subfloor seam. So you don't want to have it like where that tape is right there is a seam in the subfloor. I wouldn't want that right there within a couple inches of it. So I want it to lap over so it protects it from that seam there. It cuts super easy with a razor blade, and they are more or less perforated, so it's nice and flexible, but it doesn't tear, so you still have to cut them. Basically the way I do it, I just kind of line it up, see where the best place to cut is for the wall here. Cut this way, and then we'll see how far we gotta go in. And the knife follows the grooves real easy. And you don't have to worry too much about it being like a super tight fit to all the corners and the walls. I mean, the tile can float over top of, you know, a little 1-inch gap in the corner. You're just gonna fill it with thin set anyways. And the heat cable doesn't go tight to the wall as it is. So it's not like we need to have the cable right in these corners. So if it doesn't reach, you don't really have to cut it in the center of a puck. You can just cut it on the seams. And then when we go and thin set our tile down, we can just fill those little voids without really any issue there. I'm not gonna run them into the closet. The closet here has the access door to get into the crawl space. So the tile is gonna stop at the inside of the wall here where the bifold's going. Kind of make like a shelf that can lift up, and then I can go ahead and lift up my access to the crawl space. So I can't tile over that because I'll never be able to open it. Plus it would be too heavy even if I made it like a removable tile. So we're also going to be heating the shower floor, and you can do this two ways. What I'm doing here is I'm going to put this on the subfloor, then I'll go ahead and drill the hole out for the drain through the Ditra and through the subfloor. My mud bed to actually pitch the floor and slope it is going to be on top of this. So I'll go ahead and I'll skim coat this with thin set once the wire's in here, to make sure the wire is embedded in the thin set and there's no dry spots around it. And then what I'll do is I'll lay out where mud bed's gonna be and actually create the pitch on top of this. So when it heats, it's gonna heat the mud underneath the tile along with the tile. You can do it where you mud the floor, you put this on top of it, and then you go ahead, put your cables in. You gotta put a layer of the Curdy waterproof membrane over top of the cables so they're waterproof. And then you can go ahead and tile on top of that. So same thing here, I'll just cut a few strips. This is just strictly, pretty much just to hold the cables in place here. we're not really trying to waterproof the floor with this at this stage in the shower. This is more or less just to hold the cables for us so that the floor can be heated. Okay, now we got all the Ditra mat down. They do make a peel and stick version of this where this has like a felt backing on it that grabs the thin set after you put it down. But they do make one that has you peel the sticker off and it's super sticky. And you just gotta make sure the floor is clean, and they have a primer you put down to seal the floor. And you literally just peel them and stick them, and those work really good. I just find that the thin set allows for a little bit of forgiveness for deflection or seams or anything like that. You put the mud down, you pack this down, and it kind of levels itself out a little bit more instead of following every little hump and bump in the floor with the sticky one. But it is an option. It is a little more money for the self-stick ones, but then you save the money on not having to mix the thin set under it, so it's probably a wash either way. Okay, so we're gonna mix up some thin set using this Schluter All Set. It's an excellent thin set. So it helps to put some water in the bucket first. If you just go and dump the dry powder in first, you end up with a bunch of it stuck to the bottom when you try to mix it. One little trick I like to do to keep the dust down is I turn on my vacuum and kind of hang it over the edge like that. As you pour it, helps keep the dust down. We'll just start mixing and we'll add some water as we need it. Once it's wet, you turn the vacuum off. It's just the initial pouring and mixing. That's good right there. It looks kind of like thick, soft serve ice cream. It's about what you want when you're putting down the Ditra or the Curdy membrane. You don't want it too thick. So you gotta let it sit for 5-10 minutes, let it slag up for a minute, then you hit it one more time with the mixer. But we're waiting for that. We'll pull these up and we just gotta wipe down the floor here with a damp sponge. We wanna kind of moisten up the plywood and get all the dust off of it. And a couple of reasons. Obviously we want the dust off so everything sticks good, but the plywood's so dry that if you go and put the thin set directly on it, it'll suck the moisture out of the thin set so quickly and it'll set up real quick and won't let it bond to the Ditra mat very well. So all we really want to do is just get the sponge a little damp and just go ahead and wipe it down. We're not trying to get it like super clean or anything. We just want it where it's not bone dry and where all that drywall dust is on it. That way we ensure we got a good bond with the thin set. To give you a good chance to make sure there's no big clumps or bumps on the floor from, you know, drywall mud or glue or anything like that, because you don't want to have any of those underneath your tile. You know, you don't want to throw your tile off or your mat off. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself with the wiping of the floor, because you want the floor to remain a little damp while you're putting the thin set down. So if you go and wipe the entire floor, if you had a big area and you wiped it all ahead of time, by the time you get to the other end of it with the thin set, it might be dried out already. So we waited the 10 minutes. After mixing it, then we mix it again for about another minute. They recommend a 1/4 by 1/4 notch, square notch trowel for underneath the Ditra mat. So we'll just use our bucket scoop and plop it down. Spread her out. I like using this just because it keeps your trowel much cleaner instead of having to dip it in there and you got a square edge against a round bucket. Those bucket scoops work pretty well. So So you want to kind of burn it in first, which is using the flat side of the trowel, and work it into the plywood. Once you get it kind of worked in flat, then you can take your notch side, put it at a 45, and even it all out. Like I said, it's kind of important to make sure your grid's lining up. It just makes installing the cable much easier when it is. So then you want to work it in. I just got like a grout float here. Just want to push it into the thin set. Kind of work it both directions. Make sure you're getting good coverage. We are. It's full contact. Make sure there's no big globs of thin set at the seams, because if there is, the wire is not going to sit very smooth or flat in those spots. So then you can just hit it with a sponge and just get the majority of it out of there. And you can walk on this stuff as soon as it's down. You don't have to wait for it to set up or anything. One thing that I forgot to do is, this is where the thermostat for the floor heat's going. And the cables, once we put them in, the wire's got to make its way back up into this box. And what I was supposed to do was leave a pull string in there or something to be able to pull the wires up through there. So all I did was I just tied a bolt on the end of a string. I'm going to try dropping it down, and it should come right out the bottom. And then we can use this to pull our wire back up to the box. And there it is. So that was pretty easy. All right, so the way these cables work is you can buy different lengths of them, and you cannot cut them down to size or anything like that. It's whatever size you order is the size you have to use. This is the actual heating part here, the gray part. This black whip is what goes up the wall to a thermostat. And depending on how you lay them out is how many square feet they can cover. So for your average floor, you skip three puck spacing. So like that. And it'll give you a square footage that way. If you want a little more heat, you can do a 3-2. So you skip 3. And then on your next one, you would skip 2. And then you go back to 3. And I'm pushing them all the way in right now just to make it easier. So you do a 3-2-3, and it gives you a square footage on that. So you have to sometimes play with them a little bit when you got a really big room. Sometimes you can get where you're pulling areas back up to try to get it all laid out, because like I said, you can't cut it or shorten it or anything like that. So I just happen to have two separate spools. They're both pretty small spools. They're both only like a 27 square foot spool. So I got like a total coverage of about 50 feet, maybe close to 60. And you can use 2 cables. 2 cables can go to 1 thermostat. That's not an issue at all. They just have to be hooked up in parallel, which, you know, both ends go into a thermostat. As long as they don't exceed the 15 amps that the thermostat can handle, you can hook up more than one. So these are both only like 2.3 amps, so I'm gonna have a total of less than 5 amps for this whole floor and the shower floor. This stuff is fairly efficient. Like I said, this whole floor, when it's using the most energy that it can, it's gonna be at 5 amps, but that, you know, as the floor heats up, it turns off and on, and it kind of self-regulates at the temperature. There's a little thermostat that goes in there that measures the temperature of the floor, and it maintains whatever temp you set it at. So we're gonna start from where they gotta end up at the thermostat. You can't go underneath any fixed objects, so you don't wanna be underneath your cabinetry, you don't wanna be underneath your toilet, anything like that. You gotta stay about 3 pucks off the wall, and that's basically it. And wherever you want to do it, if you just want to heat the walking area, you can. If you want to get a little crazier and get as close to things as you can do that. You don't have to heat the entire floor. You can just heat sections of the floor. You don't have to heat the shower floor, but you can. But yeah, we're gonna start laying it out and snapping it in and see how we can get it to lay out. This little connection here has to be in the floor. So we'll cut out a chunk of these pucks right here so it can go in there, but knowing that, we'll just start it right in front. That's not gonna work because I gotta come down and get into the shower, and I'm gonna be too close to those other wires. Off to a bad start. So we're gonna pull this up. I think we're gonna do the shower first and work our way out. So all you gotta do if you make a mistake, just pop it back out. Not a big deal. Being that this stuff has to be in thin set in the substrate, it can't just be in the air. When we go from the inside of the shower to the outside, I gotta cut a little channel here and embed it into the thin set so that it's surrounded. If there's any air pockets that it's in, that part of the cable can overheat. So we'll make a little notch here in the drywall, and we'll fill it with some thin set, and then we'll tuck the cable into that. So we want to put thin set in there first before we put the cable in. So that way there's thin set under it and over it. Okay. Tuck it in there. Next, we're gonna take some of this like heavy duty drywall corner bead tape. This will work good to keep it in place. Do the same thing on this side. This is all going to have the Curdy waterproofing membrane on top of all this, so we don't have to worry about it not being waterproof or anything like that, because it'd be completely covered. Okay, that's all we got to do with that. So now that's completely submerged with thin set. That little bit of drywall tape we use is going to hold it all in place. The only thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to skim coat this with the remaining thin set that I have. That way it's fully embedded in the thin set, and when we go to do our mud set on top of this, it won't be a big deal if the mud ends up with a little air gap or something between the cement board or the cement and the cable. So these little blocks here need to be underneath the tile. They can't be in the wall. The only thing that can be in the wall is the black cable. So we have to cut a little chunk of this Ditra mat out so that it'll be underneath the tile. Go ahead and get these wires pulled up the wall. So now you can see it's not the prettiest, just thin set all over, but I secured the two wires to the bottom plate there with a couple wire nails. We cut out the Ditra where the splice things are here, and then I just used a few fender washers and some screws to hold them down into the thin set. And then once that thin set sets up, I'll just take those screws and washers out, and then they'll be pretty much flush with the top of the Ditra mat here. You kind of see our wire layout. Had to play with it quite a few times, but I feel like I got a decent layout. This area kind of came a little funky, but it's all got pretty much the same spacing everywhere. And then the shower has a 2-3 spacing the whole way, and I went over top of it all with a pretty thick coat of thin set. So it's all locked in there. It's all embedded in the thin set now. The cable that goes through is all embedded into the thin set here up and over the curb. And tomorrow, after this dries, I'll do my actual mud bed here for the shower floor with the pitch in it. So it'll come up probably 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches all the way around the wall, and pitch it down to the drain in the center there. But yeah, I think it looks good. Went on each side of the toilet, even though no one ever really be standing there. Might as well heat it. Didn't do anything where the vanity's at, and didn't go into the closet. And then we do got the wires up here where they'll make the connection to the thermostat and hook up to the power. Give you guys a little peek of the tile here. So these are gonna be the floor tiles. So these are 24 by 48 porcelain. This is MSI makes them, and it's part of their Oxide series. and this one's called magnetic. And then the wall tile in the shower, also 24 by 48 porcelain, also MSI. This is a Brighton gray, and it's a matte finish for the walls. It's got just enough sheen to it, but it's not shiny. So that's what we're putting on the walls, and I think I'm going to do the ceiling too. And that, the floor outside the shower is this, and also the floor in the shower is the same color as the magnetic, but it's 2 by 2 squares for the floor in the shower. So before we start setting any of these, what I want to do is get a piece of curtain here and put it right outside the shower and have it go up the curb to about here and cover the floor right outside the shower here, because this is the most place where you're gonna have water on your floor, and I just don't want any water to get down in between the tile and the curb. So that's why we're gonna wrap this up, and then when we waterproof the shower floor, we'll wrap over on top of that. So from there, 3 feet out, 6 feet over, all this would be fully waterproof. I could do the whole floor. I just, in my opinion, I don't see really a point to that. If there was a tub or something in here, it'd be a different story. But being this is the most prone place for water, I'm going to protect this. And being that we have large format tile and that they're porcelain, the only place water ever really could get through is at the grout joints. And when you got a 1/16 of an inch grout joint, very little water is actually end up through the tile.